Hey guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of 4th&Baron, where we cover all the hottest stories from the world of sports and esports. I'm Blake.
And I'm Connor.
And to quote a couple guys named Mike and Mike, we are back and better than ever. Had a little blip on the schedule last week, but we're back to our regular programming.
That's right.
Connor, how'd you use your week off?
Week off? Well, I used it to play all my League of Legends placements, Blake. And you'll be happy to know that after going 8-2, I was placed in Silver 5. So
It seems pretty brutal.
It's rough. But you know what? I've heard of a lot of my friends have been, or a lot of people I know have been placed kind of tiers below where they belong. So I'm going to take this to mean I just have a challenge to go. I'm going to climb through all of Silver over the next few weeks. Let's see if I can do it.
Is this the season where you make challenger?
Yeah, I think.
I know you're always just trying to get over that line.
I'm always right below challenger, like right around low silver. So I'm thinking that this year is the year that I finally push past the barriers of golds, platinum, diamond, and master, and get right to challenger.
Oh yeah, just make it there. Well, I'm gonna continue to be the unranked dark horse. Whenever you get into a queue and you're like, oh man, how many silver borders do I have like on my team? How many gold borders do I have? But when you see the guy with no border, you're like, what's this guy gonna do? We don't even know. He's just the dark horse. I embrace that.
He's a wild card.
All right, but we have a great show for you guys today. So on today's episode, Peyton Manning, Megatron, and Hemet Nessingwary all teeter on the verge of retirement. But we're going to start today's episode with the White Knight of the NFL himself, Peyton Manning, potentially riding off into the sunset with a fairy tale-esque win on football's largest stage, the Super Bowl. The Broncos contained Cam Newton with fierce defense and pulled out a commanding 24-10 win over the Panthers. It was a game that was filled with turnovers, miscues, dominating defense. Connor, I thought this was an all-around entertaining game. I want to get your perspective on your main takeaways from this year's Super Bowl 50.
All right, I'm gonna set you up with a story here, Blake. Are you ready? So,
give me a story.
Long ago, in the year 1998, a overall first-round draft pick, who no one had any expectations for or believed in, stepped onto the stage as an Indianapolis Colt, and he said, you know what? I'm going to be the best quarterback that has ever existed, ever. And 18 years later, he ends his career with the most all-time wins, post and regular season combined, the most throwing yards in a single season and total, most passing touchdowns in a single season and total, and with 2 Super Bowl victories and the most MVP awards ever, with 5, the most of any player in history. That man is Peyton Manning, and if he does retire, he does complete his storybook ending. And Blake, as you doubted the Patriots when they played against the Chiefs, I doubted the Broncos when they were going up against the Panthers. This Panthers team was terrifyingly good, looking like just stomping some of the best defenses in the league coming in. But Blake, I just want to, and I want to really dig this into you, because you were saying this was not going to be a game. You were talking about Peyton Manning being laid down on his brittle bones. You didn't believe at all. And there are 3 words that I told you that I'm going to reiterate right now that explain the story of this game and every other game there's ever been. And it's defense wins championships, Blake. And that is what came about during this game. Peyton Manning, the White Knight, actually had extremely little to do with this game. And as a friend recently pointed out to me, while it might not have turned out this way, if Peyton Manning had literally taken a knee on every single drive the Broncos had and then kicked a field goal when it was available, the Broncos still would have outscored the Panthers this game and won. So Peyton being at the helm, he certainly didn't mess anything up. He kept everything going. But Von Miller won the Super Bowl MVP for a reason, because he played out of his mind this game. You had the 2 best pass rushers in the league coming up against Cam Newton, and they contained him. And Cam did not look happy. Like, that was one of the biggest things for me, is that Cam Newton's this energized guy, he's this competitive guy. He's kind of he's a happy-looking guy when he plays. He looks happy. And he did not look happy at all, as I saw during that game. He was upset. He couldn't, I guess, get unleashed. The Panthers never got into any kind of rhythm. Their offense couldn't get anything going. And The defense did a good job holding him in, and here we are. And gave Peyton Manning his 200th win, which is really the football gods kind of gave him a gift after all of his seasons of excelling in his by far worst season ever, a season which would normally get you replaced if you were any other quarterback. Like in the middle of that season, what he threw for 9 touchdowns and 17 interceptions over the course of the season. Like that is a terrible season.
Second, almost led the league in interceptions, and he only played in
he didn't play in every single game either. And so and he was replaced for a little bit because he was injured, but. This isn't a fairy tale season. The real fairy tale, I think, would be if he had beaten the Seahawks a couple years ago, if he had ended on that season. But here we are. But Blake, I'll let you jump in a little bit. I'm just so revved up after that game. I couldn't believe what happened.
I mean, look, you got to give it up to the guy. I mean, clearly he has had one of the most impressive quarterback resumes ever constructed. I mean, and to your point, he didn't mess up this game, and in fact, he there were times when he looked a little bit like old Peyton Manning. He made some throws.
He did. Some deep passes.
There were a couple balls where I was like, he put a little spice on that one. It had a little zip to it. A couple times when he found Emmanuel Sanders there for consecutive 20-yard gains. That was impressive. But you mentioned the football gods gave him this one. I don't think there's anything mysterious about this. Just like you said, defense travels and defense wins you championships. All you had to do is look at Cam Newton and understand the way this game is going. You noticed immediately the big frown on his face and the grass stains all over his uniform because they were hitting this guy. I mean, so you gotta give the front four credit. DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller are the two, like you said, the two best pass rushers in pro football. But they couldn't have done anything if the middle had not held on that line. Because Cam Newton, I predicted that he was going to be able to escape a few times, going to scramble, gash you for 10 or 15 yards, and keep that pass rushers honest. But he wasn't able to do that. The middle held, and Cam Newton, you just can't escape outside when you got those two guys coming at you off the corners. So, incredibly good, admirable job done. I think they had up 6 or 7 sacks on Cam Newton. Plenty of hits. You saw the hits that these guys were putting on him. They were vicious. So you got to give it up there. But you mentioned some of the accolades and the records that Peyton Manning has set. Just to paint a picture for you for how much the defense of the Denver Broncos won this game for them, I want to give you some other records that Peyton Manning set in this Super Bowl win. His QBR on a scale of 0 to 100 was 10. That's the lowest ever for a Super Bowl win. The Broncos' offense totaled 194 yards. That's the lowest ever for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, the first offense to get under 200 yards and still win the game in the Super Bowl.
That's right. His offense also was 1 for 14 on third down conversions, the lowest ever for a Super Bowl.
With I think 9 or 10 straight.
Yeah, outside of that opening drive, they really struggled to move the ball. And that was because, let's face it, Carolina's defense came to play.
Yeah.
They really, they forced a lot of 3 and outs, especially in that second half. They were keeping them in that game. All right, let's not take anything away. It's just Carolina's offense that seemed to struggle so much. Jonathan Stewart, the running back, clearly wasn't himself after having to leave the game when he came down on his knee wrong. He clearly wasn't able to give him much of a running presence. Cam was never really able to escape. And Cam obviously had a bad night, all right? Let's say that. But I really want to defend Cam a little bit because I saw a lot of throws that he made that were just flat out dropped.
That's true.
The interception that was tipped off Ted Ginn's hands, not his fault, right? People blame him a lot for. Well, first of all, let's go back to the what's the receiver's name? The Crotch. His name is Crotchery.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, he had that first quarter. He had that catch for 20, 30, 25 yards over the middle. That was ruled an incompletion. Went to review. It did look like a completion.
It
looked like he controlled that to the ground.
It never touched the ground.
The ball did not touch the ground yet.
That's the big thing.
That was, as a friend remarked to us at the time, we're going to look at that. We look at that after the game and said that was a big turning point in that game because the next play, they're 3rd and 10 on their own 8-yard line, and what do you know? DeMarcus Ware strip sacks Cam Newton, and they recover in the end zone.
Right.
That if
It's a
if
big
that catch had
momentum
been
moment.
uphill, that would have been like a get out of jail free card. So that's not Cam's fault. Crabtree had also another big drop that would have put Carolina in scoring position. I think it was in the third quarter. So Cam, and let's not forget, he did run like 10 or 12 times in the first half for like 45 or 50 yards.
Yeah.
So he was working his legs as well as his arm. I thought he suffered from not much help from his receiving core. I thought he suffered from actually a pretty poor game called by the offensive
Well,
coordinator.
Blake, you're talking about Cam Newton and stuff. I want to bring up a moment then for you. In the fourth quarter, Cam Newton fumbles the ball. The ball bounces in front of him. I think a teammate of his, I think it might have been their running back, what's his name? Jonathan Stewart. Jonathan Stewart dives for the ball. And it looks like it might pop out. Cam Newton backs away. In a press conference after the Super Bowl, just yesterday, Cam came out and said that the reason he did not go for this ball is because he was worried about getting injured, which, as some have remarked, could possibly be the worst possible reason you could have given for not going for the ball. It may have been honest, but in the biggest game that there is, in the thing that you do for your entire life, there are people out there playing with broken bodies, patchwork together, people just throwing their well-being on the line in order to win this game, and you're worried about potentially getting injured by diving for a fumble in the fourth quarter when you're down 2 scores, but you lose this fumble, the game's over, right? And so, Cam is this super competitive, hyper competitive guy.
He's supposed to be.
What do you think about that then? All the praise you're giving him right now. What about that moment?
Well, I don't want this to be construed as praise, because Cam Newton absolutely had a bad night. But I think I wanted to come to his defense a little bit, because I definitely didn't want to put the weight of this loss on his shoulders.
Sure not.
Right? He really. I thought
this is more the Denver defense playing well than I think him playing poorly as well.
Yeah, and the shortcomings of the entire offense,
right?
And special teams. Carolina just had problems all over the place, But to your point, Cam Newton coming out and saying that injury was in the forefront of his mind when he didn't dive on that ball was the worst thing he could have said, because I personally was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for not diving on that ball.
So was I.
And I thought it was actually from a strategic standpoint, right? Because
your ball could pop out.
That football takes odd bounces, right? You never know what everyone's swiping at it and diving for it,
right?
So I can see not wanting to throw yourself in the thick of things, anticipating it, pop out, and you want to be on your feet and ready to scoop it up. So I was actually, and that's just not the way it happened, but I was really ready to give him the strategic benefit of the doubt, but. When you just come out and condemn yourself like that, what can you say? That's weak, Cam. Fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. This is the biggest stage that there is, and all year long, you've invited the spotlight on yourself, right? You've asked for that.
Right.
You asked for all that pressure and said, I can handle all that pressure. And clearly, looking at his face throughout the game, I think he just couldn't take it. I think it was a little bit too much for him.
It did certainly look like
his post-game actions and all that stuff. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it was disappointing.
It did certainly look like he got caught up in the lights. I do want to make a quick note also, because you mentioned it, on special teams. We're going to talk a lot about Denver offense didn't look great. Denver defense looked phenomenal. There's a third phase, to every football team. That's special teams. And Denver special teams really, I think, was kind of the unsung hero of this game as well. In particular, in punting and kick returning. This Denver offense that couldn't convert a third down to save their life in this game, you're giving up really good field position if you can't convert a first down. Generally, if you can't move the ball down the field, it's all dependent on your punter to get the ball the rest of the way to kind of pin the opposing offense at a decent rate. And for the most part, Denver's punter kept Carolina with definitely before the 40-yard line. I think most of their drives started on average around their 20 or 30-yard line, and so the punter was able to hold them back, and then their kick returner was able to give their offense better field position in general, which also in turn helps the punter, and as well as he set up that one play, that one drive that, while it was not converted for a touchdown, did lead to an eventual field goal for Denver. And any point, and when your offense isn't performing, any points that can be scored anywhere become extremely critical in these types of kind of 20 or less scoring games.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. You gotta give it up, and further, you gotta really heap some criticism on Carolina's special teams, because we remember that play, the second quarter I believe, and the Carolina special teams, just the punt team came out, and Denver guy caught the ball, and all the Carolina guys surrounding him just did this, because they thought he had called for a fair catch and he hadn't, and he proceeded to run the 43 yards.
Yeah.
On that punt return. I'm just like, what are you doing, guys? That's bad coaching, but you got be aware, be observant. It's tough, but the last point I make is you really got to give up to this defense. You can make an argument that they scored 14 of those 24 points in that
definitely.
game. The 7 off the first strip sack in the first half, and then in the fourth quarter
with the other strip
with the strip sack that they caused, that set up for the C.J. Anderson little 5-yard run
and the 2-point conversion.
That was that you're right. That was all them essentially. So you gotta give it up.
That's true, and it definitely, as a Super Bowl, I think it was incredibly exciting, and a good example that you can't really count a team out. The Broncos kind of came in and did the opposite of what the Seahawks did to them, really, a couple years ago, in terms of just defensively dominating a game.
Beat them up on defense.
And I love watching it. And congratulations, of course, to Peyton Manning on I guess, finally earning that second win and equaling Eli at the very least. I think that was kind of what he needed to do, and or just cement his legacy. A lot of people were thinking that, and not a lot of people thought he would do it.
Eli did not look so happy, by the way, when they showed him in the booth on some of those.
There were a number of he's offered explanations for that as well. There are a lot of great memes that came out of this. It was a meme-filled game, so we've got that going for us. In the meantime, Blake, I want to curve gears here to talk about a very different topic, but almost as big and game change, and is maybe even more important for a lot of people. We're talking about Hearthstone, and we're talking about a new Hearthstone format. So in our absence, we were delighted to find out that Blizzard is changing really everything when it comes to ranked play. There's going to be 2 new playing formats rather than casual and ranked. There's going to be a format called Standard and a format called Wild. Now, the way Wild works is similar to how playing works right now. All cards are allowed. It's kind of a free-for-all, and you'll have a ranked score there. In addition, there is going to be a new format, which will be the competitive format from now on, and on the esports side of Hearthstone, and that's called Standard. And Standard is going to use only the most recent... Blake, what is it exactly? I think it's only the most recent expansion and the most recent 2 adventures.
It's a calendar basis, so it's the current year and the previous.
Okay, yeah. So the only cards released in the current year and the previous year will be allowed to be used in Standard, as well as a core set of the basic set of cards, the expert set, if you will. And so what that essentially means is that coming this spring, Goblins vs. Gnomes and Curse of Naxxramas will no longer, any cards given from either of those expansions will no longer be allowed in Standard format or in competitive play. Blake, what do these changes mean for Hearthstone going forward, and how is the meta going to be affected by this new Standard format?
Right. Well, in a word, the meta is being turned absolutely upside down. But to roll it back and just take a broader view of the scope of these changes, Standard format is absolutely a great thing for the competitive Hearthstone scene, and it's going to really free up the designers to be able to design interesting cards. Just being able to design an interesting 4-drop now without having to compete with Paladin Shredder, that's so important. And then also keep the game fresh, evolving. One of my favorite things about competitive card games and competitive Hearthstone in particular is deck building skill.
Right.
That is going to be amped up to 11 with these changes coming through. So really ensuring it's the Hearthstone and competitive Hearthstone survival the next few years is what Standard does. Um, Most people will note that every other competitive card game, that every other significant competitive card game, really has adopted a similar format. Magic: The Gathering obviously has adopted actually a pretty strict Standard format esque
Yes.
system. Legend of the Five Rings has done this as well. My preferred card game, Yu-Gi-Oh, actually hasn't, but they also do in a sense.
They ban
Because
cards.
every set just drags. Well, they have a ban and forbidden list, but every set just like power creeps the previous set so hard that essentially you're removing older sets. Um, so every card game has something like this. This does ensure the health of competitive play and ensures a lot more variety, a lot more deck building skill, which I think is great things. But also on the other end of the spectrum, it keeps the game accessible for new players. We used to talk to when we talk about to people that are trying to get into Hearthstone, we say like, oh, what you should probably set aside some money. You should really get some of the
And
adventures
craft Dr.
because
Boom.
yeah, it's just like there are some staples you need from some of these older sets, and you really just gotta you gotta buck up and really grind, and you gotta pay some money. And more than that, it's just having knowledge of that particular volume of cards. It's just harder and harder to
Right.
maintain. So be able to limit that for at least a couple years, where it seems like a good experience, where the cards that you do open from packs and that you get from adventures are good for a good amount of time. You're not just losing in a few months cards that you opened. That's a bad feeling too, right? So it feels like they've struck a pretty good balance on the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in my opinion, standard format is only good for the game. It actually seems like a very reasonable way to ensure new player play and spice up competitive play. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I definitely agree with you, especially in terms of the casual play, which is where I think that, well, it's obvious that the meta is going to change, removing, over 100 cards from the game.
Oh,
Very key cards. I mentioned already, we mentioned already Piloted Shredder and Dr. Boom, which I'm going to pull up here for those who are unfamiliar, being some of the most staple cards of the expansion. But I think...
Well, these were cards that really defined their mana cost, right? Dr. Boom is known as Dr. 7 for a reason. They're just, it's not only is an excellent card in its own right, but it really, every other 7-drop out there just can't compete. There's no interesting dynamic there. If you need a 7-drop, it's Dr. Boom. And,
Right.
Same with 4-drop. Every mid-range deck is essentially playing Piloted Shredder as one of their 4-drops. It's just that good. It's just edging out interesting other interesting cards.
There's just so much value there, and Dr. Boom even is played over 8. It has been shown that even if he cost 8 mana, he would be worthy of being played over a lot of cards that are also legendary and very strong, but are 8 mana cards. And so he is really just has come to appear in every single deck and been a staple, and that is both big and competitive because such a staple card is being removed. But at the same time, these cards are being removed from everyone equally, so maybe it won't have as big of an effect as we think it will, at least in terms of relative skill. But I think for casual is where we definitely see the most impact, because you're right, the kind of pay barrier, the knowledge barrier, the card barrier is really going away from, or at least it's not going to be unmanageable. The way things were going, it seemed like we would have like 5 or 6 different types of packs in the shop all at the same time, and using 30 cards in a deck, like 95, 99% of the cards you earn, you're probably not going to use at some point anyway, and it really would create a bad experience for anyone who's new and wanted to play a little bit of ranked. And so what removing these cards is doing, I think, is really helping casual players get into the game a lot, and I think that's the most important thing here.
I agree, but I think we can also agree that the competitive meta is about to get absolutely insane.
Oh yeah,
because as you mentioned, when this standard goes into effect this spring, that rule of the only legal cards will be from the basic set and this calendar year and last calendar year. Naxxramas and Goblins vs. Gnomes will both be excluded from that time frame. So we are losing a lot of cards and a lot of really key cards in a lot of decks.
Let's go over some of those there, Blake.
We could go over countless examples, but there are a few to highlight. First off is generic anti-aggro tools are being lost from a lot of mid-range and a lot of control decks. These are things like Zombie Chow from Naxxramas is being lost. Deathlord and Sludge Belchers, two really key taunts that
really efficient
classes like Priest or you're right, or Warrior could make efficient use of. Those things are being lost.
Antique heal bot.
You're
5 mana, heal, 8 HP.
Very critical for mid-range or control decks to survive, combo decks or burst decks, things like that. So these are, I think, people would say that the rise of aggro is coming back. I'm a little bit skeptical on that. I have a feeling that Blizzard is smart enough and they know what they're doing enough to where they wouldn't take away all these anti-aggro tools without giving us some significant ones in return. But that's I think a big generic takeaway. Those are all basic cards. Those are available to every deck.
There's still a lot of healing cards and AoE, like most of the AoE clears for a lot of classes are sticking around.
Right.
And a big one that you always love hearing about that's sticking around, the ultimate anti-aggro, Jackson, will be remaining in the meta. So you'll still have your full character heals as well.
That's right. Now, if we move to class cards, that's where things start to get really intense, and all these cards that we started to identify as just class staples are going to be gone. For instance, one of the biggest hits to Warrior is the loss of Deathspite. That was a Curse of Naxxramas card. Deathspite might be the best card in the patron deck. It's certainly a staple card in the control.
I think I would go as far to say it's the best Warrior card in general. I think it is.
It's such a solid card, and how they're going to figure out how to deal with that. There's no real other weapon that you would that does its job.
Place, yeah.
Right. Ogre Warmaul is not going to do it. King's Defender's not going to do it. Gorehowl is still good, but that's
Arcanite Reaper isn't going to do it either.
You're certainly right. So, that's a really huge loss from Warrior. When you look at, oh my god, poor Paladin. Paladin's just getting crushed because they're losing Shielded Minibot.
Oh, poor Paladin. I don't think anyone is lamenting the downfall of Paladin with this.
Mid-range Paladin is a very fair deck.
No, but it's all because Secret Paladin loses half of its cards in this
easily
in this format.
Muster for Battle's being lost. Pilot Shredder, which was a staple in Paladin, is being lost.
Shielded Minibot.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Muster's a big one though.
That's right. So that is a huge hit to Paladin.
Well, what's interesting though to me about Muster for Battle, if we want to take a quick pause, is that Paladin was one of the worst classes before GVG came out, and
right.
Which is hard to remember because right now it just seems so absurdly dominating. But Paladin was one of the worst classes in particular because you never really felt like you had a whole lot to do in the first couple of turns. You usually were just using your hero power to summon 1/1 Silverhand recruits, and it didn't do much to the board, and you kind of had to wait until you got big swing cards like Equality and Consecration for a complete board clear, or the Paladin Legendary Tyrion, or Lay on Hands or something. You were waiting until your big cards came out for Control Paladin. What Muster for Battle did was it gave Paladin an early answer. It made Paladin maybe a bit too strong, but it gave Paladin just a high-value card it could play early that it could get some decent board presence. And that's what really propelled Paladin back into the competitive meta. So I'm interested to see whether Paladin even still exists as a high-tier deck, losing a lot of its most efficient cards with Tuing Muster for Battle and Shielded Minibot.
I agree, but then I feel like I can also say that about so many other decks. Think about something like Tempo Mage, right? Losing Flame Cannon and an Unstable Portal. That's insane. Think about Face Hunter or Midrange Hunter. You're losing Web Spinner and Glaive Zuko. Things like Demon Lock. You're losing Implosion, which is insanely important, as well as Void Caller.
Yeah, Void Caller. Summoning
these are
demons
all
from your hand.
incredible. I mean, things like Mech Shaman is gone completely.
I believe you lose
Mal'Ganis
as well, actually.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, also a very important demon.
Yeah, any mech deck is destroyed. And
it seems
Priest,
like...
when I was talking about AoE before, I forgot that Priest loses Light Bomb, which is its primary AoE killer
It's very
aside from
important.
Holy Nova.
Priest is also getting hit pretty hard. They're losing Dark Cultist. You know, they would all again often run Sludge Belcher. Lothep, that's one I forgot that is going out with Curse of Naxxramas. That's a very classic, anti-combo piece that's ubiquitous across many decks. It seems like the only class that isn't being absolutely crushed by this, and I don't want to say crushed because,
There are a lot
they're
of
going to be
cards.
given a lot of new tools, but not turned upside down from this, is Druid.
Yes.
Druid seems to be not losing anything particularly important. It seems it's because Druid has ridden this wave of extremely strong basic class cards for so long.
Right.
Your Keepers of the Grove, your
Force of
Swipes,
Nature,
Druid of the
Savage
Claws,
Roar, Ancient of
Wrath,
War.
Cenarius. These are all extremely, and so these cards will all still be legal in the standard format. So that leads us to our final point for this Hearthstone story is that Ben Brode and the Hearthstone development team have come out and said that we view this as a unique opportunity since basic
cards are going to be
classic
sticking
cards,
around.
right? They're going to be sticking around forever. This is our unique opportunity to go in and make a lot of balance changes, which they are famously very conservative. Well, conservative on executing.
Yes.
Conservative
not
on
conservating with actually hammering cards down.
Right. They're very much not afraid of crushing cards. To really go in and change. I think he said 2 to 20. Is Ben Brode's quote? 2 to 20
Well,
basic cards for various classes to kind of put them in line with where they want the direction of the game to go. So a lot of people speculated that Druid is going to be very hard hit by those changes.
And you know what those two cards are that he was probably thinking of when he listed?
We'll see.
Are probably
We'll see.
Force of Nature and Savage Roar. The infamous Druid combo summons 3 2/2 treants that have charge. Is Force of Nature. Savage Roar gives all of your characters plus 2 attack. So it's an instant 14 damage from hand plus 2 attack per extra minion you have plus that minion's attack. It is kind of the ultimate original example of like a one-turn KO type of maneuver. It's referred to as the combo, in which you kind of have to keep your health up and your opponent's board clear throughout the entire game. For fear of losing. The combo can, normally out on turn 9, can also appear earlier with the help of cards like Innervate, Emperor Thorson, and Wild Growth. And so I think it's pretty safe to assume that if any cards are going to be changed, it's going to be those. Other popular theories behind cards that are being changed are around Ice Block and Alex Straza, which are key cards to Freeze Mage, which is a deck that is also very largely unaffected by these changes.
Good point.
Not a lot of Freeze Mages even run anti-heal bot, but while they can, it's definitely not a necessary card for the deck. And so Freeze Mage can still very much exist in its old form in this new meta, I believe.
Although a last card that I feel like we should talk about that we haven't mentioned so far is the loss of Mad Scientist. That's a card
that is one I did forget. You're right.
Hugely valuable to, Hunter and Mage decks. Staple in almost all of them. Not necessarily Paladin so much. But I feel that now that you're not getting such insane value off your Mad Scientist, that Blizzard can start, making some really meaningful, really impactful secrets. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the secrets now that they can remove that insane value from Mad Scientist.
Yeah, Mad Scientist is definitely considered by... Reyna had come out and said before when it was released that it was the most broken card in the game. And you can talk about Dr. Boom and Piloted Shredder. This is a card that it flew under the radar when it was announced and might be flying under the radar now. This is a card that is going to be a devastating loss for any secret-bearing class aside from Paladin. Hunter and Mage are definitely going to suffer severely with the loss of this card.
So we'll see. Clearly, a lot of deck archetypes go under. A lot of deck archetypes just can't be supported anymore. Like you mentioned, any deck, that's definitely gone.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of classes are going to have to go back to the core of what they were and reinvent some of their, the aspects that we've come to take for granted.
And it'll be interesting to see what cards from the Grand Tournament, the most recent expansion, end up kind of coming to shine. Cards that might have been ignored before might come forward, and maybe some Inspire cards could come up and show up in the middle. We'll see. It'll be fun to track, definitely.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that and let you guys know our thoughts as that whole process moves forward into the spring. But moving on now to the NBA, the Warriors have continued to dominate this season, still rolling at 47-4. They're showing no signs of slowing down either, particularly evidenced with a 116-108 win over the Oklahoma City Thunder last Saturday. So Connor, the Warriors have now beaten every single team that we thought posed any sort of a threat to them. And for many of them, they've just beaten them down. I want to ask you, do you think they're on the verge of making this NBA season uninteresting to the viewers?
Yeah, Blake, I think that the Warriors are I understand what you're saying in terms of a team that is so dominant that it almost makes it like, well, what's the fun of even trying? Because they're going to win. But I want to go back to a philosophy that you yourself have brought up to me quite a few times, and it's that, I mean, you're going to have favorites, and you're going to have people that you're 99% sure are going to win things, but you know what? At the end of the day, you got to play the games, right? And that they've crushed the competition in individual games, and you can make a lot of arguments about how they're going to perform in a series, and they could be on fire. But you know what? Blake, you of all people should know that teams can go 18-1, right? That teams that look unstoppable, players that look unstoppable, momentum can be broken, things can go wrong, or underdogs can shine. You know, Alliance in Season 4 World Championship can have a perfect game against one of the top Korean teams in Nanjing White Shield, and then the very next day lose a game to out of nowhere underdog Brazilian team Kaboom, who no one thought would even win a game at the tournament. Is it not fun really to see a team winning over and over again? Yeah, it's not fun unless they're your team, right? Or unless you really like them. But what is arguably even better is when if you're not a fan of them, it's when the streaking team is beaten by an underdog. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but like, you got to play the games, and I think that I don't think it's unfun. I think everyone's just kind of waiting to see who's going to beat them, who's going to do it, who's going to take them down.
So you think the interest in this season comes from what, waiting to see where they slip up, or if they slip up?
I think that could be equally as fun.
Interesting. I think that's an interesting perspective to take. From my point of view, the Warriors are not making basketball uninteresting directly, and that's because if you've watched some games of the Golden State Warriors, they are a delight to watch for basketball fans.
That's true too.
They are like the most complete. They play like a team in such a beautiful way that we haven't seen for a long time. And they're just so dominant. They're so skillful all around. It's just they are must-watch television. So let me just say, like, the Golden State Warriors themselves are putting on clinics every single night, and you just have to be watching them. You're just glued to your television set. It's a thing of art to be able to witness their games. That is incredibly interesting, and that's, for me, I'm not a fan of particularly of Golden State. I have to watch them. The problem is now, all of these other periphery games, the Golden State Warrior games are great. All these other periphery games, you're just kind of like,
what's the point?
Why would I care about this, right? Why do I care about this if it doesn't involve the Golden State Warriors? Because this team, if you're in the West, you're not getting past the Golden State Warriors to the playoffs. And if you're in the East, you're not going to beat the Golden State Warriors in the finals. So what's the point, right? So I can see where some people do have that, disinterest in them now, where you're just like, if it's not the Golden State Warriors, am I going to watch this game? Am I going to, spend my Wednesday night on this? Maybe not.
I would argue for a lot of basketball fans that maybe you're not even as interested. Is that so different how things are normally? I mean, I feel like you're always going to be, if you're a fan of a team, you're always going to be interested in their games, right? If you like basketball and you're a Bulls fan, you're going to love watching the Bulls. Like, whether or not they suck or they're good, like, you watch the Bulls. That's what you do. And then all the other games, they just kind of happen. You watch them if they're interesting. So you just watch the Warrior games. I mean, teams play 80 games a season. you've got enough games to watch. You don't need to watch every single. Not everyone's like us, but you don't need to watch every single basketball game.
Well, but wouldn't you agree that this season, more so than any other season that we can remember, has more junk games than? Like, just the volume of junk games is way greater.
It's. I don't know if I'd say junk games. It's like it's not like the Warriors are like the baseline and everyone else is bad. It's like everyone is pretty good, and the Warriors are like great.
When you watch them, Golden State Warriors play, and then you just go watch, I don't know, the Utah Jazz play, they're just like, it's just like they're milling around in the court out there. You're just like, what is this? What is this product that I'm watching, unfold before me? It's not so great. So the Warriors have kind of spoiled me in that respect. But I want to make a case to you for why the NBA season is not over. All right, I know. So people come look at this January and February for basketball. And they say the Warriors just had 3 or 4 huge challenges, right, thrown at them kind of back to back to back, and people assume that they would lose a couple of those, right? They had Bulls in Chicago,
yeah.
They had Cavaliers in Cleveland, they had San Antonio at home, they had Thunder at home. For the Bulls, the Cavs, and the Spurs game,
that weren't even close.
They crushed those games. They embarrassed them. All right, at least for Cavs and Spurs, they beat them by 30 each. But let me run through and tell you why each of those teams is going to be back with a vengeance in the playoffs, right? And that's what we're really looking for. This is just middle of the season, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Fundamentally,
you got to play the games.
Not the most interesting that basketball is going to be. The playoffs are where we're looking for. So look, you have the Spurs with the mastermind himself. This is the Bill Belichick of basketball. This is Greg Popovich, all right? Tim Duncan, the best defender on that team, did not play in that game at all, right? LaMarcus Aldridge, the Tim Duncan in training, who's also a superstar in his own right, played horribly that game. And Greg Popovich, of any person, is going to be able to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, I have this strategy that I kept reserved tonight. I didn't unveil. And he's going to be able to figure out, hey, we can kind of, we can move the defense like this. We can, play more up-tempo if need be. The Spurs are going to have a plan, and they're going to have all their players when they meet the Warriors again in the postseason. The Cavs, the last time since getting beaten by the Warriors, and in part because they got beaten by the Warriors, the Cavs all of a sudden have a brand new head coach that the team has suddenly gotten behind, right. Tyronn Lue. And he has them playing this crazy up-tempo offense, and now they seem like they're really hitting their stride. They're really gelling. So that's all of a sudden can't really compare when you're the Warriors, can't really compare to the old paradigm anymore, because that's a different Warriors team that you beat in January and in December. You look at the Bulls, who seem to be getting better every week.
And that's gonna be true for a lot of teams going forward and into the playoffs, is that they're not the same team they were in the regular season, right?
You're absolutely right. And then the Thunder played them closer than any of those games. I mean, 116 to 108 seems like an 8-point disparity, seems like a lot, but I mean, they had the game tied late into the fourth quarter. All right.
Yeah.
This is a team that is not scared of Golden State. Absolutely not. And when their role players and their superstars are cranking, they can beat anybody. So I just made I think there are 3 or maybe 4 teams that you can legitimately say, even though the Warriors crushed them, or beat them rather, in the last 2 months, that they will still be able to pose a challenge to them in the postseason, and that's what keeps the interest for me in the season.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because, like I said, like you say all the time, is that you can't count these teams out, especially when they only play the one time in the regular season. And to your point about teams fumbling around, not looking good, I mean, you're going to expect that a lot in the regular season too. I mean, you got to watch the Raiders play during the regular football season earlier. Right? I mean, they're getting better, but you get what I mean. Like, you're always going to have those teams that don't make the playoffs, and they're not going to look as good, and that's why they don't make the playoffs, right? When we get towards playoff basketball, I think that's where the quality of games is obviously going to go up, but that's where it's going to get real interesting to see who can go 7 games if necessary with the Warriors, and who could maybe topple them. And
don't get me wrong. I don't think anyone's going 7 games with the Warriors. I honestly don't think it's going to happen. But I think, could you go 6 games? Could you have an interesting series?
You could at least make it interesting.
I think you really could. and that's what I'm looking forward to. I think that can happen from a lot of different teams. Whereas some people are saying, they're calling it over. I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah, for sure. And that'll be interesting to track kind of as we go forward. But Blake, our next topic that we're going to talk about, we're going to make a slight shift over now. We're going to break down a new sport we haven't talked about really here on 4th&Baron. This is tennis, men's tennis specifically. So we're going to be talking about the Australian Open, finished recently, with Novak Djokovic taking it over Andy Murray in the finals in Australia, making that Djokovic's 11th Grand Slam championship victory. Djokovic also, through his route, defeated Roger Federer in 4 sets in the semifinals. Blake, what I want to ask you, do you think that this was Federer's last chance to come back and win another title? Was this his last chance to have kind of a Peyton Manning-esque exit from men's tennis?
Yeah, I don't know if he's to that point yet. It seemed like he's certainly past his prime, and he's nearing the end of his career. I don't know if he's really. I mean, he strung together some very impressive games.
I mean, he got to the
early rounds of the
semifinals.
Australian Open.
That's always impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if we're if he's at if his career is at death's door, but this did seem to be maybe his last best chance to win the Australian Open. Do I give him a chance in Wimbledon? Where he's won umpteen times? Yeah, absolutely.
Grass is Federer's best court.
Oh, absolutely.
His favorite tournament is Wimbledon, going for 18 there. Yeah.
Yeah. It just seems like he had trouble. This is where the main concern is for me. It seems like watching him over the course of the 2 weeks of the Australian Open, he just had trouble maintaining that physical level of play across the span of all those games. Right. It just seemed like he wore down by the time he faced Djokovic in the semifinal. And that's really troubling for me. It looked like his speed, the serve on his speed...
The speed on his serve.
Excuse me, the speed on his serve lost a little bit of a zip on it. It looks like he didn't have the precise control of the ball, which often, emanates from your legs and pushing in that direction. It seemed like he just looked tired, and there's no other way to describe it. He looked tired, and that's where I have to say, for these longer tournaments, can he be great again? Absolutely. Can he be great again for 5 straight matches? I don't know, and that's where the worry is for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, and I guess maybe you're right. Saying it was a Peyton Manning exit, like his swan song, is probably not quite the right way to put it. Roger Federer.
We're going to see Federer for every other Grand Slam this year. We think
potentially, yeah. I mean, he with Andy Murray still around, with other players now coming up, new talents like Raonic, who appeared also in the semifinals. It will be a lot harder for him, definitely. But I still think that he can definitely make Grand Slams. He can still kind of fight for that victory. Federer is potentially, and maybe not even potentially, the greatest tennis player who ever has played the game, kind of in his twilight. And I still think that we can expect to see great things for him. Novak Djokovic, on the other hand, is rolling still, looking like he is in the midst of his prime, really chasing the records set by Federer and Nadal in terms of tournaments. I believe that was Djokovic's 6th Australian Open win, which is, so he had an 11th win, which is looking for, he's kind of chasing Federer's 17, although it would still be a long way off for him to get there. But with that 6th win there, he is chasing Rafael Nadal's record for most Open wins, most wins in a single Open in the French Open, which I believe is, I think, 9. I'm gonna have to double check on that. Somewhere between 7 and 9, but he's getting close to the record.
I agree. I think Djokovic is clearly at the top of his game.
I was right. It is 9.
The man to beat in tennis. There's 9. Yeah, 9
in the French for Nadal.
French.
Yeah.
I actually want to make to you a bold prediction that it doesn't count for my bold prediction for at the end of the show. but I think that this is Novak Djokovic's year to complete the Grand Slam.
But Blake, this is rare. You're doing multiple bold predictions. Normally, I can't even get one out
Yeah,
of you.
I am, but I mean, seriously, think about this. He's got the Australian Open. He's always performed great at the U.S. Open. That's been his tournament for the last few years. The only person that could challenge him on clay, Nadal, in the French Open, is clearly physically not himself. He's just not physically right. He's got some lingering issues. He's probably not going to be healthy for that tournament. And then Andy Murray, which it would be his, defending his home turf of
Andy
at
Murray
Wimbledon.
And Roger Federer probably at Wimbledon. But yeah.
You're right, Federer, but he just showed that he could beat Federer, and we said we have questions about how long Federer can last into a tournament. But Andy Murray has this Serena Sharapova interaction going on where he just can't beat Djokovic. They've met 20 times, and Andy Murray's beat him I can count on one hand the number of times he's beat him. It's just this thing. It's his kryptonite, right? So I think that Djokovic is set up perfectly to complete the Grand Slam.
See, you say that, and yet I'm going to bring up somebody you seem to have forgotten. The person who stopped Djokovic from winning the French last year in Stan Wawrinka.
Oh, you're right.
Defeating Djokovic in 4 sets. A Swedish man, just like Roger Federer. He is also a force to be reckoned with on clay and will be a staunch challenge for Djokovic. You bring a pain to my heart when you bring up Nadal, just because he's the other story here, going out in the first round of the Australian Open this year. You're right, he is the other one in comparison for the greatest tennis player ever. I grew up just absolutely loving his rivalry with Federer, watching them in every tournament. Was really a true privilege to see, and I'll always kind of think that Djokovic kind of ruined it all by upsetting both of them in a lot of tournaments. But and Nadal always had his clay, but recently, yeah, you're right. The style he plays with is so self-destructive, and it seems like it's finally caught up with him. This is a guy who's unstoppable on clay.
When he just goes on those crazy slides on the clay,
and you're right. Is just looking like it's probably not going to ever be himself again, and won't be able to catch up to Federer's record in terms of major victories.
It is heartbreaking to see. I don't want to say he'll never be healthy again, but look, we know how great
he's like Derrick Rose right now.
Well, I mean, Derrick Rose never really proved anything except for that one MVP, but we know how much of a force to be reckoned with Nadal was, and just going out in the first round of the Australian Open, that's just not him, right? He's just not physically right. He needs to, maybe even skip a couple major tournaments, take some time off. See if he can rally for a last few good years. I think is the best thing for him moving forward.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Nadal not having won a major since 2014, which was the French. So.
Not really competed in one.
Not really, not really making it past the quarters in tournaments since then. So.
It's hard to watch.
It is truly the end of an era here coming up, even if Federer is still going to be playing. After his kind of resurgence over the past couple of years, it'll be weird not seeing like numbers 1 through 3 next to Nadal's name in a lot of tournaments.
I agree. Well, speaking of ending an era, we're gonna come back full circle into the NFL, where an era may be ending for 2 really superstar players. Also, who are maybe concerned with the injury that their bodies have sustained through years of play.
Not uncommon in the NFL.
Right. Calvin Johnson, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, and Marshawn Lynch, running back for the Seahawks, were both reportedly considering early retirement. Calvin Johnson reportedly told teammates and friends before the 2015 season that it would be his last. And for his part, Marshawn Lynch has been reported as telling friends and family in the recent weeks that he's going to retire this year. So, Connor, I want to ask you this. These are 2 superstar players who still appear capable of producing at an extremely high level and are also being paid as such. So, of these 2 potential retirements, which do you think is more surprising, and which do you think has a greater chance of happening?
Well, more surprising is a tough question. Blake, the I think Marshawn Lynch definitely gets points for possibly the greatest retirement announcement ever. Tweeting during the Super Bowl, so under the radar, so much like him. I think that was. I didn't even notice it until the next day, and I went and looked. I was looking on Reddit and saw it. It was just like, oh my god,
This happened.
and while that was initially an enormous shock, I definitely think the Calvin Johnson retirement is more surprising for me. And for that, I kind of look at the team situation there. In both teams, you kind of have another player who's kind of sort of slowly taking over the role that they held at once in the team. Golden Tate, looking really good this season for Detroit, but for Marshawn Lynch especially, and I think even more so, you kind of had a situation very similar to Matt Forte in Chicago, actually, in which Marshawn Lynch was injured. Then a young new guy, Thomas Rawls, comes in, performs very, very well, and you kind of got to figure that the team might not keep Lynch around anymore. Rawls is the younger guy. He's going to be cheaper, and he's going to perform basically as well. And so it's really kind of a no-brainer if you have to choose between the two. You save a lot of cap space by not keeping a guy like Marshawn Lynch. It is surprising for both of these guys that they wouldn't start to look for other teams. But these are also guys who kind of played for the same team for a really long time, and you might think that maybe if they can't play, if they feel like they can't be standout guys in their own team. Pro football players, highly competitive guys, very loyal guys. If they can't be the standout guy on their own team, then they might not want to go and be somewhere else. Not do kind of the Brett Favre thing and go for the retirement, or the Peyton Manning thing, really, and go for the retirement tour in another, or finish up in another league, even if it means they could win a championship. But I'm still going Calvin Johnson here, just because he's still been a big talent, and I could see him going to another city and being extremely successful. And he's also a wide receiver, which I think has a slightly longer kind of life expectancy in the NFL than a running back. So for all those reasons, I'm going with Calvin.
Yeah, especially for a high collision running back like Marshawn Lynch. So tell me then, which do you think though?
Which is
either
most
of these do you
likely
see
to
as
happen?
More likely to happen?
I'm gonna go with Lynch again, just because it was least surprising to me. So the reasons are kind of all there, and I feel like this would be kind of a weird thing to. I guess I could see Lynch trolling a bunch of people with this, but I don't know. It just seems like he kind of came out and said it, and why would why would you go back on it? I guess I'm not as familiar with Marshawn, his antics off the field, so I don't know. But I think I personally could see them both happening very easily, but yeah, Marshawn still for me. But
I think the more surprising of the two is definitely Marshawn Lynch. And you look at this because this was an offense just as early as last year that was built around this man, right? He wasn't a facet of it. He was the offense. And until what's being heralded as the dumbest play call in Super Bowl history,
right,
they had a chance at back-to-back Super Bowls last year. This isn't ancient history, right? And he was performing at that level just last year. So and by the way, this was still a playoff team that was only stopped by the Carolina Panthers, who were on a monstrous roll at the time. So you're there at a high level. You're on a team who's winning. You have people on the team who like you. Cam Chancellor is, a huge Marshawn Lynch supporter on that team. Clearly you can hold out for some money on there, even though there is an element of, since Russell Wilson, went off in the second half of this season, there's an element of it's no longer your offense, so you have to find your place in it again. But I mean, at the bottom line, when your team is competing for Super Bowls like they have done, and look to continue to do, it's hard for me to see why you would want to retire from that. Calvin Johnson is just. There are two players in the league that there's one player in the league that reminds me of Calvin Johnson, and that's Rob Gronkowski, in that they're both enormous forces And they're both as such. I mean, they're just physical specimens. They're huge, right? And as such, they're just officiated differently and they're tackled differently by defenses. You just can't full on. I mean, it's such a high collision method of playing. You can't. If Calvin Johnson catches one over the middle, he's getting blown up and he's getting blown up low, right? You can't just risk him shrugging off a tackle if you go at his chest. So guys go at his knees a lot. And if you recall, he's had some recurring knee problems throughout the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's true.
Same with Rob Gronkowski. Is they just and the officiating just lets this happen because they kind of feel bad for the defenders. Like, well, what actually are they going to do? So it's clear that he's played a brand of football that's just it's more punishing than a normal wide receiver. I know, like you said, you're right. Wide receivers tend to last a little bit longer. I don't think that applies to Calvin Johnson. And moreover, he's on a terrible team. I really truly believe that if Calvin Johnson was on somewhere like the Cardinals, right, or somewhere was on the Patriots, that he would be.
He had a consistent quarterback and a decent run game.
If he was winning, yeah.
He'd be fine.
If he was winning, I honestly don't think that he would be making this decision. But I mean, let's be clear. Both these guys have made their money. They don't necessarily need, while they're leaving a lot of money on the table, they don't necessarily need more to be set for
risking
life.
Their health too.
Right. So when you're looking at both these players, high collision, high impact, I can see why they would consider retirement, especially with all the new, kind of narratives about football and head trauma and things like that. The difference between the two is Marshawn Lynch's team is competing, and Calvin Johnson's is clearly not. So that makes Marshawn's the more surprising of the two for me.
A quick point in terms of Marshawn Lynch's retirement announcement. It should be noted that on Twitter, while no official announcement has happened, Seahawks owner Paul Allen and Lynch's agent Doug Hendrickson offered gratitude in response to his tweet. Paul Allen saying thank you for Marshawn Lynch for a great career as a Seahawk. Hendrickson saying, these 9 years working for you have been a journey I will cherish and never forget. You're the greatest. Those aren't really like, got you kind of messages,
You're right. He seems pretty serious. And so,
especially with your agent. Like, your agent's the guy that's going to find you a new team.
But then, if it's a troll, wouldn't the agent be more likely to be in on it?
Well, then what about the owner,
the
really, Seahawks?
Maybe Marshawn Lynch just feels like he's come back from injury to a team that doesn't need him anymore and doesn't want him anymore, and he really wants to get out of there.
Well, if he does want to... Yeah, but if he wants to get out of there, his agent isn't going to leave him, though. He's not Johnny Manziel, which is a whole other issue that we don't have time to get into this show. If you want to broach that, just go listen to ESPN for a while.
They talk about it 24/7.
Yeah, well, the Super Bowl kind of helped with that a little, but before the Super Bowl,
there's a little blip of a non-Johnny Manziel football topic, and now we're back to it.
Yeah, that's true. And so I think that you do raise a good point in terms of the winningness, but I think it's looking at the young replacement too. You look at and I guess no official announcement has come yet, so this is kind of a suspended point, but I don't even think this is a bold prediction. I'm saying that I'm pretty confident the Bears are going to release Matt Forte at the end of this year. His contract's up and he's going to be a free agent, and they have kind of a new young talent in Jeremy Langford.
Yeah, you're right.
Just going to rehash that similar point that seeing Thomas Rawls perform in Seattle is, I think, a big reason. It might not, Lynch might not ever say that it is a reason, because I feel like he's not that type of guy, but I think it definitely played a part, and is why I could see it being more likely, or at the very least is why I could see it being more likely.
You may very well be right.
In the meantime, though, we're going to shift gears over to a new segment here on 4th&Baron. This is called Over Under, or Under Over, however you wish to say it. In this segment, we are going to talk about, we're going to focus on performance right now. Overperforming and underperforming. And in particular, because we can't do a show without talking about this, we're talking about the LCS. So, Blake, right now, I wanted to hear about who is over and who is underperforming in the League Championship Series.
Well, I think there are a lot of potential answers to this. I think now moving into week 5, we have a pretty good idea of relative power rankings between teams.
We've got a lot more data to
how
work with
players,
here.
yeah, you're right. I mean, how players are fitting into the scheme that their teams want to run. So I'm going to take a jungle, focus here. My overperformer, and this is a guy I've criticized in the past, is Reignover. On Team Immortals, this guy has really been crushing it in the jungle. Let me read you some stats. He's got a KDA of 15 with a really solid 70% kill participation, while still keeping up a really, really high CS per minute for his class.
Which is tough for
so
junglers,
this guy, he's doing everything. Clearly, he's got this great synergy with Huni, which has not evaporated. This guy, I've really criticized him in the past for being kind of mentally weak, not having a great amount of fortitude. He just seemed like he would just make this every now and then, every other game, he'd just make a crazy boneheaded play and just throw the game like a brain fart, dumb move, not like a mechanical misplay, like what are you doing kind of play. I haven't seen any of that this year. So I don't know if there's going to be, if this just like Wild Turtle Syndrome, where there's just new home for him. It's just got him, pumping on all cylinders, and that's just going to stay that way. But he has really overmatched my expectations, and to him I have to give it up. On the other side of that, though, my underperformer is also in the jungle, and he's Svenskeren. And similar to the criticism I was giving Reignover,
Team solo mid super jungler, yep.
I was praising Svenskeren at the beginning of this season, saying that I thought he would be the number 1 jungler in North America by far. I was saying that might be kind of a somewhat close between him and Rush, and that the rest of the pack would fall far behind. Rather than rise far ahead of the pack, he's very much in the middle of it. Got the 2.8 KDA, much lower kill participation. He's farming fairly competitively, but he's really just obviously not clicking with his team as well as Reignover is. I look to him to have those really early aggressive moves. I haven't seen him really just camp Bjergsen's lane and roll that lane too often, and that's what I want to see. Look, dude, you're ganking for one of the best 1v1ers in the entire game. You should be able to make something happen, right? I really haven't seen it yet. We'll see if he picks it up.
I am 100% agreeing with both of those choices, honestly, and Reignover is also someone who was widely considered to be the weakest link on the undefeated Fnatic team from last year.
Yeah, he was.
But seeing him in NA, I mean, in his game against Team Liquid this past weekend, he just bullied Dardoch in the jungle as Rek'Sai. He was in Dardoch's side of the jungle. He was stealing camps. He was knocking him away. He was forcing teammates to come out of lane to help Dardoch to clear camps. He was a menace. Similarly, Svenskeren has had lackluster both kind of macro play as well as mechanical play. He's played Kindred a couple of times and has missed some key ultimates. Kindred's ultimate prevents anyone within a certain field from dying for a short period of time. He's died with his ultimate up a lot of times,
right.
which he shouldn't really be doing on Kindred.
Left a lot to be desired on that champion. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. For my over-under, I'm going to shift gears both in region and in position. So I'm going to talk about Europe, and I'm going to talk about specifically European AD carries. The first one, the overperformer, I want to talk about Unicorns of Love's Steelback. Steelback has benefited largely from being on such a cohesive team, one of the best in Europe currently. His KDA currently is second among all European AD carries, secondly at about a 7, secondly behind Forgiven, whose KDA is an extremely high 14.
Yeah.
But that was
you're not beating that.
Yeah,
one.
that one was more expected though. He has some of the highest CS per minute, total CS, as well as kill participation of the AD carries. He has the most assists of all AD carries, tied with Forgiven at 44, as well as the I believe third most kills in the region. So he has definitely been performing, coming from the Challenger series in North America since he was removed from Fnatic last year. He's definitely overperformed. Meanwhile, the underperformer is ironically Fnatic's current AD carry, Reckless. So the reason I chose these two particularly is because Steelback was replaced by Reckless on Fnatic in the middle of last year, in between the spring and summer splits. Reckless currently is enjoying only a 3.7 KDA, which is very low for an AD carry, and has which is one of the lowest, is the fourth lowest KDA of all AD carries, as well as in general having the fifth lowest amounts of kills at only 19 in the league. Reckless is playing very much support for his team. His numbers do not match up with the position with his team's record at 5-3 for Fnatic. It really has been people like Febvin, people like Spirit, people like Gamsu carrying this game over Reckless, and him shuffling through different supports now is not helping either. So it's going to be interesting to really see how the performers go throughout the rest of the season and see whether Fnatic regrets ever dropping Steelback.
That's an interesting narrative to kind of follow. To your point, it does seem like Reckless has always, and it doesn't seem, it is the case that Reckless has always been the guy that even in losses he would put up numbers.
He had the KDA at the very least.
Reckless would get his.
And he's died a lot.
Yeah, Reckless would get his. It definitely seems that he's not living up to expectations. I don't know if he's just not meshing well with Noxiac, if he's not meshing, if he's not getting the resources, allocated to him around the map. We had voiced concerns that Spirit, would have trouble maybe ganking that bot lane since, Reckless had always played such a passive style. So definitely a narrative to keep your eyes on that old, I wonder if there's any kind of beef there because Steelback, wasn't replaced because of his poor performance.
No, he did quite well.
He was playing fantastically. It was just that Reckless said, hey, I want my health spot back at Fnatic, and they said, we'll kick this guy out the door as fast as you can get.
At that point, Reckless had proved himself to be kind of like a strictly better version of Steelback, and he's really pushing back on that.
Wonder that might not be the long-term narrative, though. I also want to take my over-under, or rather my underperformers to a more meta level, to a game mechanic level. I'm going to say Nidalee as a champion has been really underperforming for me, in the last few weeks, particularly the North American LCS. Nidalee has been played in quite a few games, registered quite a few bans. It has a win-loss, I think, of... sorry, yeah, I said it. She's just 6-7 in North America. That is crazy to me, considering how, you watch games and you just, especially for the first 10 minutes, you're just like, this Nidalee is power farming, is utterly escapable, so is power farming in their opponent's jungle, does a crazy amount of damage, and just can keep ganking wins all over the place. It's just such a rare... This kit is so powerful. I'm just looking at it, I'm saying, how are people not winning on this constantly? But it's really getting punished. And actually, that I was preparing to say this last week, but this week that Nidalee enjoyed, I think, 4 out of 6 wins, or 4 out of 6. So other times it was played. So even this week got a little bit better, but didn't quite make it to 500. But I found that those wins that Nidalee got this week is because they finally started incorporating Nidalee into more balanced team comps. And so that's going to lead me to my last underperformer, which is poke team comps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Teams that would just go all out with Nidalee jungle, Varus mid, Corki, 80 carry, right? It just seems that there's so many engage tools now, especially with the spooky ghosts being so prevalent for a few weeks there, that
the Frost Queen's claim.
They would just run out of steam, or just there are too many creative engage paths, especially with Bard coming back in, where you get those long range ultimates or creative magical journeys through walls. So when those two are linked, right, when you finally start not incorporating Nidalee in pure poke comps, it seems like the wins started coming a little bit more. So we'll have to see if that trend continues to reverse.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Nidalee too, and champions I think similar to her, is that you get into a situation where champions that are banned or are really highly contested tend to suffer in terms of win rate, ironically, either because they're banned so often that the pro players don't have a chance to play or get as good with them as they would a more comfort pick, And also because whenever a OP champion is available, like quote unquote OP, like overpowered champion is available to you, you'll just tunnel vision and pick them. You won't think like, oh, I'm going to pick Nidalee around this comp.
Right.
You're thinking, oh,
And the
shoot,
rest of your team
Nidalee is
suffers as a
open. Like,
result.
let's just pick her for the sake of picking her. Yeah, and the team suffers. Another good example of that, and a big underperformer, is Gangplank, whose ban rate is about 97%, and yet only has a 50% win rate in the 6 games he's actually been played.
That's crazy.
Which is really crazy. He seems like a champion that is completely overpowered, and yet he is very rarely played. On the other hand, a big overperformer to look into with a large amount of games, Fiora and Lulu. Fiora has been played in 13 games and has a 92% win rate. She is 12-1 in games that she has been chosen in. Along with her is Lulu, who's been played in 9 games and is 8-1 with an 88% win rate. These, I think, are definitely definite overperformers of the season. Lulu allowing you to turn, while doing a bunch of damage, offering hard crowd control in terms of her polymorph, as well as empowering any AD carry. The fact that Frost Queen's Claim is now a staple mage item, which was a great item on Lulu already, I think in particular has helped her out. And Fiora, just in general, has benefited from the AD item changes recently. As a duelist top laner, she is a menace when she gets going. And the healing field that she can create with her ultimate is great for suspended team fights. She does a bunch of damage. These are champions that have really kind of risen. This is a Freudian slip.
Unfortunately, no.
I don't know about that, but yeah, they have risen to the occasion and been.
That's good. That's great that Fiora is doing well too, because Fiora top lane matchups are often really fun to watch. Whether it's Fiora Quinn or Fiora Poppy,
she's a very tough champion to play.
Fun to watch. Just to watch that back and forth. I will end with one champion that I forgot to mention. Not necessarily an underperformer, but it's just a straight up clunker, which is Ryze.
I would call Ryze an underperformer. Ryze is currently enjoying an 11% win rate despite a 70% ban rate.
He's been playing in like 10 games, I think, and he just got his first win in NA this week. That's crazy to me. Like, people always considered Ryze to be a late game powerhouse, in 2 lanes, right? In the mid lane or in top lane. And still not finding any success in that champion is just kind of mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. He was actually the other person I was going to bring up as an underperformer. Ryze and actually Braum. Braum has been played in 9 games with only 2 wins.
That's also
which you'd think, with you talking about the weakness of poke comps, that Braum coming in there with his shield would be able to stop them and enjoy a higher win rate, but that really isn't the case. So Braum and Ryze, highly contested picks that don't really turn out all that well. And I think Ryze is a good example, again, like what I said before, of a champion you assume is OP, and so you're just going to pick them and not really build a comp around them. Considering who gets the picks as well, and on what teams is also going to play a role in this. We don't kind of have the data breakdown in front of us, but if a team like Giants is playing Ryze versus a team like Immortals, you're going to notice a definite difference.
Yeah.
But that has been all of the segments of our show for now. Blake, we're going to close off like we normally do, and these are some bold predictions. Now, you gave one earlier in the show, which was already above your average bold predictions. So let me hear what you got this time. I'm very curious.
I'm anticipating not being graded on that one that I gave earlier in the show, right? It's just on a time frame that we can't keep track of.
Fine.
That's going to be like a year. So I'm going to give one that's coming up real soon. This is less of a prediction and more of a plea, all right? This is a cry for help. I predict and pray that Kobe Bryant is going to retire after the NBA All-Star Game this year.
Rather than at the end of the season?
Right. He said he would go this entire season, but it's just painful for me to watch. Not Kobe Bryant. I mean, Kobe Bryant's been terrible, don't get me wrong, but he's had one good game against the Timberwolves in which they actually won.
Yeah.
But this has gone beyond just like, oh, this great player that I watched, he's soiling that legacy, soiling that memory, by playing so terribly now. This has been like the most selfish action by a superstar. It just, he is holding the LA Lakers hostage, right? They have no season. He said, Lakers, you get to have no season this year just to celebrate my career with you, right? He like they clearly just can't move on, and they can't win anything, and and they can't even get their young guys to get experience because Kobe Bryant's hogging all the shots. He's demanding.
Oh man,
it's really terrible. So I'm saying, look, Kobe, you got on the All-Star team. You're gonna be celebrated all weekend. You've already had some kind of your goodbye farewell tour around the country. You've had some home games. You've had one really good game that you just took over, scored 38 and won. Just call it quits after the All-Star game, please.
Honestly, Blake, I think that might be my favorite prediction that you've ever made. That was great.
It's hard to watch.
I'm not gonna lie to you. It really is. And I think that you're right. Him retiring after the All-Star game would make a lot of sense. Again, because of his. I kind of jumped the gun on the screen a little bit here, but because of his accolades, he's holding this team hostage. That's a great way to put it. In the meantime, and you can't see this right now, Blake, but all the viewers can, I have brought up a component of my bold prediction.
Oh, I know what it is.
Do you really?
No.
Okay. So right now, we were talking about Hearthstone decks, right, coming in and out of focus, and a big card that we actually did not discuss that is part of one of the strongest decks right now, according to Tempo Storm's meta snapshot. This deck is currently ranked in the top 3. That is Oil Rogue. Oil Rogue is losing a card that is called Tinker's Sharpsword Oil, which is the card around which this deck was named, and is an incredibly powerful card. I have it right here. That is used for just a lot of sudden bursts from a rogue. The removal of this card, I believe, will not destroy the rogue. It will destroy the Oil Rogue, but there is another iteration of rogue that has existed before and will exist again, known as Miracle Rogue, that we have talked about before, that I am making my bold prediction being that Miracle Rogue will be a top-tier deck in standard format not long after it is released.
So wait, does top tier mean like top 20, top 10?
Top 20 is not
3?
top tier. Top 5 is top tier. Top 5.
Wow. You're going to say it's top 5?
I'm going to put this in top 5. Is a form of Miracle Rogue.
So just including gadgets in?
Yes. Miracle Rogue, Oil Rogue has actually dropped in the standings more recently, but has been top of it in the past few weeks. But yes, including Gadget Sand with Tomb Pillager, which we had discussed previously on the show, I think that Miracle Rogue is going to be, and it's going to use South Sea Deckhand, is going to be big.
Wow. Well, you heard it here, folks. Get ready for the revenge of Miracle.
Although I do have to answer to
the nightmares coming back.
Yeah, that's right. I do have to answer to a previous bold prediction I made. I did predict that not only the Carolina Panthers would win the Super Bowl, but at the very least it would be the team from the NFC to come in. I was really close, but I'm actually very happy to have been proven wrong on that bold prediction. But I will answer to that.
Well, then you're going to be right at home here on the show.
We'll see, Blake. We'll see. I don't know if Kobe Bryant is retiring anytime soon. In the meantime, thank you, everyone.
He just may get to the end of the year and say, "Hey, Lakers, we're gonna do this again. That was fun."
I love that so much. Let's keep going. Oh man. Well, in the meantime, thank you all for listening. This has been 4th&Baron. Congratulations once again to the Denver Broncos, Super Bowl champions, and to Peyton Manning on a wonderful career. If he decides to retire, at the very least, he's going to be drinking a specific type of beer that I learned recently he was not paid to name in the.
I told you he was not.
He was not paid for those
you guys
placements. So Yeah, congratulations, and thank you all for watching.